Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us for another QE Babble. It's great to have you with us. This month's topic of discussion is all about deploying with speed and quality. And we know that this is a dilemma that many delivery teams face. So deploying at speed and delivering new features to get that competitive market edge, or delivering with high quality for the project's long-term success. And in quality engineering, this is a topic of interest to help delivery teams try and find a better balance between the two. So in today's session, we're going to try and cover three key areas. The first one's going to be what strategy the panel feel works best when trying to balance speed and quality. And how do we deal with tricky stakeholders who want to release quickly? And also, what are the risks associated with a rapid delivery environment, and how can these be effectively managed? In the final part of the session, we'll look to try and share the views and questions hopefully coming through from everyone who's watching along today. So please try and fire those in as you watch. Do it from the start, and I can try and pick out the best ones to ask the panel later on. As ever, we've assembled a brilliant panel of people with lots of experience of working in quality engineering, who are going to share their experiences of rapid software delivery. And also, they've all got experiences of working in different sectors, which I think is interesting. So finance, travel, and retail, to name a few. And it'll be really interesting to see how those experiences of different industries influence their decisions around how to deploy quickly. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to today's panel. Welcome, Greg, Melissa, and Anthony. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining.
Hello.
Greg, I'll come to you first, if that's okay. If you want to just briefly introduce yourself and tell us maybe why you feel this is an important topic before going on to share your view on how this can be effectively managed. So what strategy works best?
Yeah, no problem at all. Well, yes, so I'm Greg, based in Lincoln, and been in the quality world for longer than I care to remember now. Started off my software life as a Java developer, and it was one of those situations in a bit of a startup situation where they were looking for a tester, an automator, and it was that situation where everyone else stepped back and it landed on me. Didn't look back, really enjoyed it, and then moved into the sort of quality management area across many industries now, including finance. My last two roles was head of quality at GoDaddy before moving on to Currys now. And this is very close to my heart because across all these industries, this sort of deployment speed and quality takes many different forms and many different directions. Especially, like I say, in finance, it's a very secure data protection environment. To now retail, where it's like fast delivery is important to have that edge. And there's loads of different ways and strategies around that. And I've tried quite a few of them, some successful, some not so successful. So yeah, looking forward to having this good debate about ways and strategies moving forward.
Brilliant. And do you want to just maybe start us off by sharing? And I appreciate it's quite a challenge to start with, but in your experience, what strategy has worked best when you're trying to marry these two things together?
So I really had to think about this because there's so many factors that come into it, and there's so many times people come to you as a quality manager or as a quality engineer and like, hey, look, come on, we need all this automated. We need this faster. We want to deliver faster. Oh, your sprint cadence needs to be bigger. We want to get this out. And that's the nature of the beast at the end of the day. That's our job. But you've got to take a lot of things into consideration. So like I say, I've worked in a lot of different companies. And with that, I've had perfect teams where they're really mature. And, you can be constantly deploying, making small incremental changes and having great automated regression suites, non-functional testing, all in these lovely pipelines where you can see everything that's going, automatic rollbacks, blue-green deployments. It's the world's perfect. And if you can get that, roll with it. But let's face it, the real day-to-day, most teams aren't like that. teams are at different stages of maturity. You might be working on some legacy stack, which very brittle. You cannot force these things at a time. So with saying that, you really have to gather that knowledge beforehand and understand the nuances of the team structure, the development cycle, and like I say, the infrastructure. If it's all greenfield stuff, cloud, all these keywords and everything, you really can shift left and get your testing in early to get your TDD in. So you've got that assurance. You can manage the risk. You can share with stakeholders all the time, every day, and get this fast delivery quality right every time. But we don't live in that perfect world. So it's managing expectations as well. That is a big part of this, especially when dealing with the people who aren't as hands-on, who have very strict deadlines. And, they're going to push it. I understand it. And at the end of the day, that's the business. So saying that, and I've waffled on about how hard it is, let's talk about how to get it done, is understanding where it is, where your automation is, where your critical paths are, to make sure that the main functionality, the golden state, let's say, is untouched. Once you get that, you can always iterate out on. So right from the get-go, you've got to have a clear understanding of your customer journeys and your revenue along there. So you always want your customers to be able to navigate through quickly. And one big thing I find that it often falls by the wayside is the non-functional side. So you want to make sure that your page load times and everything remains the same. And that's one thing that I find often gets missed, is those baselines of what's acceptable as well. So again, it's getting in early, understanding the requirements, and then building on that. Now, if it's a manual process as well, that's more complexity and everything along there. But you've got to embrace what you've got, work with the hand you're dealt. On that, make use of tools that you've got. There's plenty of open source tools, but more often than not, the company has test management tools or deployment tools that aren't utilized correctly. So it's worth investing the time, working with the teams to really build out that knowledge and get the best out of them. Because if there's anything that can help you, use it. I say anything that can bring down the risk, because no one wants to be called out after a deployment or functionality's gone wrong. It's bad for morale, it's bad for rework, it's bad for the bottom line. So very much the case of getting it right first time. And, things happen, but it's being able to identify, fix and redeploy fast and move forward. So most strategies, it's really hard to have an all-encompassing one. I find this is never a straightforward question. You can never say, hey, I've got this strategy that's going to work for every team I'm going to work with. Me personally, I work across 12 teams at the minute, 12 teams, and every team's different. Some are deploying every day and they've got automatic documentation. That's the nirvana, right? And they don't even have to go to a cab. They don't even have to go for release sign-off. They're that mature, that embedded. So if in that case, I'm not going to touch it. Whilst the more immature teams, the ones with the more junior members and everything, it takes a lot more hand-holding, understanding, trying things, working out where we can improve and iterating on that. So it's all dependent on the team, really. And I know that's not the full answer everyone's looking for, that, hey, look, there's a magic pill. It does take hard work, but at the core of it is understanding your application.
Okay, cheers, Greg. There's a lot there, and I've written quite a lot down. We'll try and come back to pick up some of those points afterwards. But I appreciate that. Thanks, Anthony. It's good to have you here. Thanks for joining. Obviously, I've spoken to yourself and a couple of others at Moneybox about this, and it was a topic that I know that you were particularly keen to kind of to tackle. So I think I'm right in saying that Moneybox have. Well, I'm sure you've put a lot of thought and effort into this. So do you want to share some of that with us?
Yeah, sure, Matt. So I'll start off with the introduction. So I'm Anthony, been at Moneybox for about 4 years now. Senior QA lead, as you can see in my title there. And just give you a bit of background on Moneybox. It's a focused app to help people turn their money into something greater. Really great app. That's why I'm really excited to focus on what we can do there. And obviously, being app focused, that's really the big reason why, speed and quality is important. Customers have got that in their hands straight away. We want to make sure that, what they see and what they have is something that, they get, they can get hold of straight away. So, big features, big releases are something that people want. There's always customer requests coming in. And then from a competitor side as well, you always want to have that edge. There's lots of competition in the fintech space. So anything we can do to separate ourselves and beat others to the market is obviously going to be really crucial. So where other teams are focusing on how they can do better, QA is obviously a big part of that, and whatever we can do. And is that something we've been working at Moneybox to try and speed that stuff up and coming up with a few different ideas and different ways of working to make that happen.
Okay, so do you want to just maybe share, and again, it's a big question, but just a point around what you feel works best when trying to balance these two things?
Yeah, sure. So I've got like three, I think, key things. I think like Greg mentioned and like you mentioned as well, Matt, there's quite a few things that we can cover in terms of strategy. But I thought I'd just kind of share three points that I think are really good in terms of that balancing speed and quality. So the first one is around risk, and obviously risk is something that's really important for all projects and something that everyone talks about. So what we're doing in Moneybox, we have a concept called consultative QA that gives us the tools to be able to balance the right amount of testing based on the level of risk. So what we do at the start of a project to try and work this out is look at a balanced approach. So we have a lovely spreadsheet that has all different types of ideas that I can go into in a bit later. But essentially it starts off with an Amigo style session where we group all the stakeholders together, build team and anyone else that's got a vested interest in it, to talk about what the worst case scenario is, what the high risks are, and kind of tease all that stuff out. And then from there, we can ask questions like what level of testing is needed. We can look at things like potential ways of speeding that up or reducing things down. So for example, if we've got everything tested at a ticket level, it's a relatively low risk project. Do we need end-to-end if we have that extensive coverage? And also as well in terms of repeatability, if we have a great automation suite where we've got maybe lots of like API UI testing already covered, or if the devs have put some great unit tests in, do we need to supplement that with manual testing? Can we just get that covered as part of the automation pack? And another thing as well is around third-party integration. So Moneybox has quite a few of them, so as I'm sure other people do as well, where if we feel like the sandbox environment probably isn't the best place to test that, what we probably then want to do is focus more on live proving rather than end-to-end. So again, rather than focusing too much on maybe where there isn't the right value, we can then just shift more of a focus on live proving and doing more around the live environment rather than just doing that. Obviously, if it's a lower risk thing from a maybe like a user perspective, but working in finance, it's something that's really key. So a lot of our third-party integrations are really crucial. And then kind of moving on from that, we have loads of other different collaborative ways of working. So the QA team have QA reviews, which works with the developers and other stakeholders to talk through the test strategies and just align on the kind of risk we want to take, and understanding this approach of understanding where the best place to test is. Similar to the developers have refinement sessions, ADR reviews, those sorts of places to, again, kind of make sure that everyone's happy with their approach and making sure that we're all aligned on what we want to happen. So key thing here is just aligning on all of that build, all that testing to make sure everyone's got that visibility rather than being siloed off. And then just the last point on this as well was just around rebalancing. So inevitably things are going to change, requirements are maybe going to be missed midway through, and just making sure that we go back and kind of think about all these things, re-understand any things we need to think about in terms of risk, where maybe we didn't do something, or maybe we didn't think we need to have certain testing in one place, but now actually the requirements have changed, or maybe we've identified new risks, and we kind of go back and reevaluate based on maybe what we had before. So maybe we kind of shuffle things around, or maybe we need to have more end-to-end testing, or where we maybe didn't think about what we need before. So that's like the first kind of key area I wanted to talk about. The second one was around just releasing in like smaller chunks. I know it seems like a bit of an obvious one. We always want to avoid that big bang release, and kind of a big thing there is around potential merging and deployment issues, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. But some of the other things that we have found that's given really good value is around splitting things up to then get out more unknown risks. So a few examples that kind of illustrate that is where maybe we've split up really focused milestones around back-end and mobile delivery work. And we've maybe seen that mobile work has to be completed sooner because there's a weekly release cycle because of the app stores, and maybe something simple as well as resource, where maybe there's someone off for a week and maybe the back-end developer needs to unblock someone from mobile to be able to release something, but maybe that wasn't ultra clear at the start, where we kind of just had an overall timeline of when we need to deliver, and breaking those things down really highlight those sorts of dependencies and risks. And then another example I just wanted to give was around if there's like a really critical deadline that we can't really adjust or can't really reduce testing on. So in terms of Moneybox, we have an operational team that focus on all the investments, like moving cash around, and very important stuff that has to go right and can't, basically, but the highest risk, probably one of the highest risks we have in the business. So we had a recent project where they needed like 2 or 3 weeks to be able to test from that perspective, and it was only, I think, about a 6-week build project. So the last thing we wanted was to bolt on 3 weeks of additional testing to something that, you know, we wanted to get out really quick and really urgently. So what we did was chop up the way that we focused on the project and saw that we could actually deliver these operational parts earlier and then maybe focus on the user and app focused parts later. So what we actually did was parallel test the live proving of the operational side. So the investment operations team could concurrently test those 3 weeks worth of testing whilst the developers were working on the more user focused things that didn't actually have an impact on that. So it just meant that not only were the investment operations team getting able to test early and build their confidence, when it actually came to the release, they didn't actually need to do anything else. So we were able to essentially, as per the project plan, hoover up those 3 weeks within that 6. So that was like a really big win there, just to show how important it is to try and work out those different things and think about how to split up testing. And then the last point I got was around harnessing the skills and knowledge outside of QA. So QA is always potentially that bottleneck, especially when things come in the last team, usually on the end of the conveyor belt. So what we've found is other teams are actually really keen and really excited to actually help QA and test some of those things. So everyone wants to contribute to a successful launch, a successful feature, and see all everyone's hard work kind of go out and do what it's supposed to do. And one of the things that we found, we've actually got a whole bunch of teams to actually help. So we've had devs helping with QA, we've had our product teams, we've even helped, or even the support teams have actually helped do some of the testing as well. So where it's maybe end user focused, where maybe we've built something that's for the support teams to use, we'll get those along with the journey as well. But the main thing that we've found is as long as QA work with them still, give them the coverage, give them requirements, making sure we set the path through them, they can actually go on, test that, and actually deliver really valuable testing, which again removes that bottleneck. And I think the last thing as well that we've really found is useful is opening up internal betas for employees. And again, it's a nice way to get extra eyes on it. It's a nice way to utilize everyone in the business. And also as well, sometimes it avoids a real heavyweight live proving. So if it's a low risk feature, but we do want to verify some things in live, we can just open it up to the business. And then just the last project we had on our simple saver, where we added a reward rate to users based on certain eligibility. So we kind of offered that out to the business. We just wanted to get a feel for it within kind of the live environment without sending it out to customers. And I think we have about 45 employees want to sign up and help test. So again, it's a really valuable tool to get other people looking at it and getting people excited about QA, not just kind of in the tech teams. So it's a bit of a nice win-win there as well.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. Yeah, I've written some good stuff down there. But last point, particularly interesting. We'll come back to that. Melissa, thanks for waiting so patiently. It's lovely to have you here. Tell us a bit about yourself and your views on this topic.
Yes, just thank you so much for inviting me. It's just great to hear the points that Greg and Anthony have made. So I can relate to a lot of those. I'm Melissa. I'm currently a quality engineering manager at EasyJet. So I've been there about a year now. I've been in the software testing industry, 15 years plus, that sort of thing. I write a testing blog called fishoutthebox.medium.com. And I get involved in kind of testing community events. events. I feel this topic is really important because of the previous experience that I've had. Maybe other people can relate that are listening to this. I've had situations where they've tried to boot stuff out without any testing happening at all, or they've kind of sort of, perhaps the word is constructive criticism, trying to say that our testing, we're doing too much and it's not adding the right value. So I've had some really tricky conversations with stakeholders in the past about trying to get that right level of kind of testing. And previously, I think when I first started as a software tester, I used to get really frustrated by, things like bugs not being fixed and so on. But I think throughout my experience, I've learned a lot, and hopefully I've got a couple of tips to share. So is it all right if I go on to that, Matt?
Yes,
Talk through
definitely.
the
Yeah, I'd
tips.
love to. Yeah.
So I think the first tip I would give is kind of understand why you're doing something and who it's for. I think as a team, if you have that understanding of the why and the who, most importantly, our customers, you can work together collectively as a team to kind of move forward and drive to whatever you're delivering. Because if there is that conflict around speed versus quality, you're still moving towards that same shared goal. So it's kind of a reminder that we're all here to do meet that shared goal. We're trying to deliver it in the right way that we believe is possible. So it's a lot about collaboration and communication. So understanding your destination and then just sharing your perspectives, communicating and collaborating a lot to then meet that end goal. So I always think now progress over perfection. So if a particular bug doesn't get fixed or whatever, it probably doesn't matter in the long run. It just depends on the risk. So risk assessment and impact assessment, every single stage throughout the sort of cycle from requirements to design is just so important. We've done a lot of work at EasyJet in terms of getting ourselves in at the beginning of projects and making the team kind of think about things like, what are our requirements like that? Do they meet the purpose and like who we're delivering something for? So there's a lot of things that you can do throughout a delivery cycle. So at each stage. So I think risk assessment and sort of impact assessment is really important. But yeah, I think sometimes actually as well, from a well-being perspective, just remember it's not only you and the team, and it's a team effort to get something out of the door. And I think just working together as a team, that I keep saying, communicating, collaborating and working together will help you achieve what you need to do. If stakeholders are saying they want to deliver with speed, right, it's like, how as a team do we do this? So it's not only up to quality engineering, it's up to us as a team to figure out the best way forward and have discussions about that. We might be able to lead and have those conversations, but we still want input from other people because everyone has that different perspective, and that's what builds really great products, those people with different perspectives.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, I'm obviously looking at this from a completely different perspective to yourselves and most of the people watching. But what you were saying there around, collaboration, and I think what I got from that was, having understanding what the common goal is and making sure that that's shared and equal between different people within the team, because everyone's got a responsibility. Everyone's jobs are different, but they've all got a shared responsibility. I can see how that would be really important, because you probably end up risking sort of siloing yourselves, or maybe creating a lack of understanding on what everyone's actual responsibilities are if you don't collaborate.
Exactly that. I feel like if you don't have the same shared understanding, it creates friction and it slows you down. So if you can create that common understanding and what you're working towards, then it just helps and it makes things quicker, from my experience.
Anthony, I'll just pick up one thing you said, because this was one of the things that I was thinking about before we sort of committed to this topic. That you mentioned the first thing you said about the fact that you work for an app-focused company. Do you think that, and that means that basically these features, these deployments, end up in the hand of a customer very quickly? Do you think that this sort of topic is even more kind of pertinent to a company who have an app, just because for that simple reason that those features get delivered to someone's hands, their device, so quickly, and we get so much from our devices?
Yeah, I think a lot of the expectation from an app, I think it's more kind of like pick up and play. People, it's a lot easier to open up an app and play around with it than it is maybe going on, say, a banking website and have a look at some of the settings there. It's probably less inquisitive. And I think the way, especially that Moneybox is interacting with customers and engaging them, have like all sorts of tools and ways of helping people create goals. I think people are just more naturally inquisitive as well. So especially in terms of like regression as well, making sure we haven't broken anything, because I think a lot of the time we do see just generally, I think people using apps do like to have a play with it. It's always in their pocket when they're a bit bored, probably just pull it around and poke around with it. And I think especially with their cash, I'm sure they're going to be spending a lot of time investing, looking around what options are available to them that the app can offer. So yeah, I think the inquisitive nature of people, and I think the general accessibility of the app is probably a reason why it is super important to get things out, but also make sure they get out quick and right.
Okay, brilliant. Good. Okay, so we've kind of covered that first question. We've definitely not solved it, but we've all shared our opinions. The next thing that we were going to talk about was stakeholders. They've been mentioned a couple of times already. Greg, what if I come to you? So how are stakeholders involved in this, and how does that affect your work as a quality engineer?
Yeah, this is a good subject, right? So many different shapes and forms, stakeholders, right? Quality, we deal with them all the time. Key to good stakeholder management for me is transparency. If you're all the way through, everyone can see the same information. If they can sit real-time test coverage, real-time automation results, real-time on the progression, whether it's just simply moving things across a Jira board, everyone's got the same information, comments updated. It cuts out a lot of the to-in and fro-in. Oh, what's happening here? What's going on there? What, can you push this? Everyone can see the same information. It's that transparency that cuts out a lot of the mess that goes on and cuts down chatter. We all have noisy teams. We all have noisy Slacks. We all have crazy inboxes. And, we all know stakeholders will try and push it as much as they can. They want to get their stuff done. But again, if we're all seeing the same information, if we're all visible all the way through the release cycle, it cuts down that chatter, and you can really focus then on the main points of, okay, you want to change something, well, this is what it's going to impact. This is where we are here. Quantifiable metrics as well. Again, data doesn't lie. It takes away that matter of interpretation of stuff. And then everyone's on the same page. Again, it's that working as a team. Melissa summed it up really well. Really like that. It's a team effort, and stakeholders are part of that team, and you've got to be able to talk to them on a level basis as well. So again, good soft skills. I think a good test manager and everything has to utilize the good soft skills. It's no good, drawing a line in the sand or digging your heels in. It's having that open communication, and that oils the wheels of conversation with stakeholders. Hey, look, this is what this is our where we're for our regression pack. If it's manual, or look, we're seeing some degradation on page load speed. All these things that everyone can see and understand. And if you manage it rightly, I'm a big believer in not drowning people in the technical jargon. So talking to people in ways that everyone can understand. So if you've got a test report, don't have it just in tech jargon. Do it so everyone can understand what the test is doing. And then everyone's got the same information. You can move forward like that. And once you've got built that sort of trust, and everyone's, you know, can see that information, know it's reliable, know it's current. Everyone's got this start in that same starting point and the same understanding, and then you can have them conversations of, okay, how do we progress from this current issue that you want to push something, or you want to change the sprint scope, how that's going to affect the testing team. You know, everything's on the table. And I'm sure over our careers, we've all been hit where they've tried to bring something last minute in, but then they've got to understand what that hits. They can read the same information as what you've got and try and understand that before they bring it in as well. So it cuts out this to and fro in dead time in meetings as well. So good way for me, good way of handling stakeholders is just complete transparency and using the tools to present the data of what it is.
Yeah, thank you. You said also explaining impacts and yeah, using data because data doesn't lie.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, nice one. Anthony, your perspective on this. People, I sort of see it as like there's always this sort of constant thirst. I would imagine within the business to like constantly be evolving, particularly with something like Moneybox. I've used the Moneybox app, and I do see new features come through all the time. I can only imagine what the sort of the roadmap looks like. How does it work in terms of your role and managing stakeholders who want to get things out quick?
So probably a lot of my stuff is similar to what Greg was saying around, like get the information visible, work with stakeholders, work on actually building that relationship with them. But I've got a few things to specifically talk about that we've done in Moneybox and we do within the QA team. So I think the first one is around bringing on the stakeholders, bringing them on the journey of the kind of testing map and the general tech roadmap as well. So I think a lot of the time the stakeholders, especially non-tech stakeholders, maybe like project managers, just want to be involved and want to have that information and don't really want to chase people. They kind of just want the information that they need, know where to find it, and also know when they're going to get it as well. So I think a lot of the time just defining the value of specific testing activities will definitely help show where some of the timings may be a bit longer or kind of why certain things need to be done. So again, aligning that to risk and aligning that to some of the things that we can show where if we do this, we get this value, and this is why this needs to take any longer. And just having that working relationship with them is quite good. And I think as well, probably one of the biggest things around I think stakeholders asking questions is where there might be lengthier testing activities after dev completion. So if there's like a 2-3 week end-to-end period or a live proving period, you'll probably have to prepare to talk through that. I think that's probably going to be a lot of the time. That's going to be the sort of stuff that they're going to question, because I feel like a lot of time there might be a bit more scrutiny around testing activities, where it's like, okay, build's going to take 4 weeks, but then why is QA maybe going to take 2 or 3? And I think that's where some of the stuff I was talking around, that consultative QA piece, to try and work that into the kind of general cycle rather than just bolt it on at the end. So I think just talking through those key activities and maybe those longer ones as well, and making sure that, understanding the value and just making sure they feel like they're part of the journey rather than just saying, here's what testing is going to look like. And I think just on that as well, not just looking from a QA perspective, but maybe from like a team tech or like build perspective, that what we do is align with everyone. So we kind of agree what sort of plan we're going to take. So once everyone's happy with approach and we've kind of got the build set out to say, this is where we think testing is going to be, this is where we think build's going to be, and these are the sorts of things we want to mitigate in terms of risk to be able to shuffle things around. I think a lot of the time, if you just go to a stakeholder and they might say, this isn't enough time to test, or this is too long to test, need to cut it down. I think as a team view, it'd be quite good to then show, this is what we need as a team rather than just as QA. So just as a very crude example, where if you've agreed as a team that you might need a week's end to end, and then a stakeholder says, don't have a week, as a dev, knowing how much value that's going to add, I don't think they'd be too happy in cutting down that potential de-risking of that week of end to end, knowing that there may be live bugs going through. So just kind of getting support from developers, getting support from other teams as well to show, no, actually it's that kind of testing is needed as a whole rather than just from a QA perspective. And then again, building what Greg was saying around like stakeholders, like they love clear and concise comms, like anything you can do to keep them updated and know where that information is, it's really good. So what we do is like make test plans really visible. We kind of share them in channels in Slack. That's what we mainly use. And what we do as well is during key periods, give daily updates. So if there's a really critical launch and we're in the midst of end-to-end testing, we'll have a nice end of day message to say, here's what's left, here's what features we're currently testing, here's any bugs raised, here's anything that maybe needs to be explored further. We'll chuck some emojis in there as well, so it's a bit more easier to read, kind of keep it red, green, amber, all that sort of stuff, just to really make the information accessible as well, rather than just kind of dumping a load of information and not being able to do it. So we really try and make it digestible by throwing in things like emojis and bullet points. And also as well, just having the expectation that they'll get that every day, so we never get chased on when things are going to come in or what's the status of stuff. They can have confidence that's going to come in every day. And then in terms of, I've got this kind of last thing around like building trust and demonstrating expertise. So not necessarily maybe directly linked to releasing quicker, but in terms of like building that trust to then know that you're trusted to understand, these are the times we actually need. I think it's quite good to just to note that as we have continual launches and we find bugs, that relationship gets better and kind of builds better with stakeholders. And I think there's more trust in understanding, okay, well, we want to release quicker, but actually we understand, we'll take your word that these are the things we actually need to do, rather than them pushing to crunch activities down. And I think some of the ways to do that is not shying away from live bugs. Like, there's always going to be bugs, just making sure that you're on track to do that and making sure that, those are rectified and resolved quickly. And again, those same line of comms and communication, and as well, just keeping momentum on post-launch activities. So Moneybox has a big culture of continuous improvement in everything from like continual feedback loops across all teams, retros, you're actually sharing lessons learned and adapting from them. All those sorts of things help stakeholders show that you're adding value, you know what you're doing, but kind of ultimately means that if they are pushing for release quicker, that maybe they'll be a bit less hard on the push, knowing that you've had the delivery experience, you've delivered on the right timelines, and what you suggested is probably the best practice based on kind of all these things and all this proactivity.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. I think you also kind of shared Greg's point around transparency, communication, advocacy as well. So making sure that everyone's aware of what the role is of testing and what it's there to do, defining the value, I think you said, which is really interesting. Thank you. Melissa, what's your experience been of working with stakeholders on this?
I'm sure we've all had some very difficult stakeholders in this kind of arena. I think for me, in terms of a stakeholder, I just think of a human being, a person. So how I treat that person is just get to know them. I want to understand who they are, what they need, what they're about. So I think that's kind of the first tip I would give, is to really get to know your stakeholders and what they want from you, and just have that open dialogue from them. So like, what are you looking for? I found that some stakeholders work, more in a sort of, they like a more verbal kind of conversation as an update. Other people like reports and other things. So it's just kind of understanding what they want from you, and kind of get their thoughts and feedback as well. Like, is there anything that you think that we can improve on, and that sort of thing. And I really liked what was mentioned earlier about sort of bringing them on a journey. I really, really like that. And I think it's the whole team, including the stakeholders, of that journey that you're going through. So if you can get into a project from the start, you can have those early conversations about what does good look like. So in agile world, sometimes we use a definition of ready and done, or you could just talk about what does good look like for us. And Greg mentioned something about non-functional requirements being left in the dust. I feel that happens quite a lot. So if we can get involved a bit earlier and say, actually, what good looks like is that we're talking about non-functionals from the very start here. So I think like setting expectations, kind of at the start is a really good thing, and just bring them on the journey. Because I found that if you don't do that, what happens is you're stuck in the build stage, you're finding stuff, they want to release tomorrow, and then this is where the conflict comes, because you don't have the same journey and expectations. So it just gets really difficult. Also, I think about well-being here. So sometimes they say, I want to ship this yesterday. And actually, there's no way on earth that you're going to do that. And it's actually explaining to them and pushing back and saying, no, this is not possible, and explain the reason. So normally what we do at EasyJet and what I'm really big on is a risk assessment. Explain the risks to them. If we don't do this type of testing, we might see performance issues. The website might go down. Just really trying to explain it in kind of like plain language. So I'd say look after yourself and push back if you need to, and just have those what I would say is sometimes tough conversations. They're really difficult. But if you are in that situation where you've got this deadline looming and they're saying we're going to release this regardless, what I normally suggest to do is just explain what you have done and what you haven't. And then the business can make a decision whether they want to, put more effort into the testing or not. So that's kind of some kind of tips that I've had when I've been put in those situations. I just explain to them what's been done and what's not been done. But yeah, I think really try and have empathy with your stakeholders, try and put yourself in their point of view, and also try and look after yourself when you go through these kind of difficult situations. And if you need to, speak to someone else and get their point of view, saying they're trying to release like tomorrow, what can I do? Like how do I explain the risks and problems we're going to face if we don't do something? So yeah, those are a few of my thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, you said you picked up on the point about taking them on a journey, and I'm kind of assuming that if you have taken them on that journey, then you are potentially less likely to have those potential kind of issues later down the line because they'll have a better understanding essentially. So I'm just gonna. So while we've been talking, we've had quite a lot of good comments come in and some questions as well. So it's really nice to see people sort of resonating with what you're saying. So I'll flash this one up because I think it's quite relevant to some of the stuff that we've just been saying around stakeholders. So this is from Nathan. So Nathan said, do you find being more visible to stakeholders and senior leadership about what testers are doing and the value it adds shows the importance of testing, and that we sometimes have to take more time? So I think we've potentially already answered that. Would you agree?
Yeah. I think buying in, making those relationships with senior management is key. There seems to be a bit of a state across the industry at the minute where they're going, our developers can do their own testing, blah, 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 blah. And we're seeing the domino effects of that. So, yeah, making things visible and getting that buy-in from senior management as well. And again, talking through, as Melissa said earlier, these senior management, senior stakeholders, whatever you want to call them, they'll have an idea of their risk appetite, and explaining to them what the impact of these things are goes a long way. And making them networks is key as well in the quality world. We often get the blunt end of the stick if something goes wrong and everything. So getting that buy-in, getting the senior management team, whatever you want to call them, bought in is key. And having that test lead there, be able to articulate clearly, precisely, again, visual data is key, of what's going on, what the risks are, and progress is absolutely key. So if you do have to say, look, we need more time and everything, they understand. They can then make their call, because at the end of the day, it's going to be a yes or no from the senior management. And if they already know what's going on, if they already have an understanding what the test team's going on, they can make that informed decision, rather than, hey, this needs to go out. So they see the benefits and they can reap the rewards, or make that informed decision. So yeah, completely key.
Just to add on to Greg's point, I feel for me it's more about not just visibility, it's how we talk about testing as well that's really important. Because I've had working on a particular project, they thought testers were just involved in the build stage, and I feel there's an education piece there to explain about why we do testing at different stages throughout the sort of delivery cycle, because a lot of stakeholders I find that are not in sort of the delivery cycle, they just don't get it. So it's really important from my point of view to explain why we're doing stuff at each stage and like what's the end goal. And it's really just to find problems quickly, in my point of view.
We've spoken quite a bit about risk because I guess it blends quite a lot into the conversations that you have with stakeholders. But I will just come to that question briefly. David, who's been watching, who I think watched last month as well, so thanks, David. He said, one of my favourite phrases when talking about this is risk appetite. How much risk are you happy to accept? And the analogy, you can strap rockets to roller skates and go fast, but you'll probably want some level of protection before you do. We have got quite a few other kind of questions that I'm really keen to get through. But before we do that, has anyone got any points they want to raise just briefly about risk? It's obviously a huge topic. You could probably have a talk about it, just that alone. But has anyone got any points they want to talk about with risk? Anthony? Sorry. Greg, do you want to go?
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. No, it comes back to this stakeholder management and getting in early. The more you can identify risk, if you're changing payment provider for your whole site, there's a lot of risk. You've got to plan for that. But if it's fast, continual releases, not big functionality changes, you can mitigate risk. And as Melissa and Anthony said previously, if it's a defect that's not critical and everything, you can live with that. And making sure the information's there again, and calling out risk when you do find it, or when you're reporting back on a go, no go, you can always highlight stuff and again, make sure that information's there.
Cheers. Anthony, do you want to jump in here?
I'll just keep my main point, I think, around risk, and that I think crops up probably in most places, and it definitely comes up at Moneybox. It's the dreaded quick win. I'm sure we've all heard of them and experienced them, but I think probably the one thing I think that's worth talking about in terms of risk is that quick win or small changes, where I think there's that illusion of safety because it's just a small tweak, or it'll only take a couple of days, and I think those things do shield risk. And I think because it's a quick thing, maybe we don't put as much focus on it, because is there worth having like an hour or two conversation over something that Dev can just whip out in a day or so and then get it in live and then the issue's fixed. So I think the big thing, especially in that kind of rapid delivery environment where there's always things going on, there's lots of things going out, I would say don't take those quick wins on face value, and do follow those best practices. So that's some of the things I was speaking about before that Greg and Melissa have also spoken about in terms of that strategy. So if it's something smaller, then obviously run it through a lighter process and identifying the risk and making sure your strategy for dealing with risk is in place. But definitely treat it with the same kind of caution. Just maybe don't spend as much time on it, but definitely at least complete those key activities that you would regardless of size, I reckon, is the main thing there for me.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come, if I can, to some of these questions that we've had. It's been really nice to see quite a few good things come through. Let me flash this one up. So this is from Christina, and I'll read it out. So, when you try to deliver with confidence and want to speed up the releases to production, for example, using DevOps, what is your perspective and how the QA team could help? So creating unit and component tests to the same repository used by the team and monitoring in production. Does anyone want to try and tackle that? Melissa, do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, I think it's about always, I'm going to come back to, is quality as a culture and working together with your team to build in sort of those quality processes and things to do. So it just really depends, I think, in terms of kind of what team you have, what skill set, and just kind of having confidence. Because what you could do is draw something out, from requirements all the way to delivery, and put what you're doing at each of the different stages. So, for example, are you creating those kind of automated kind of checks that you're doing? Are you running security scans on the code? You know, there's a whole range of different things that you could do. And I guess it depends on your goals and objectives again of what you want to do within your team. So I'd have conversations with your team. If you want to, is that the goal to speed up your releases, or do you want to focus on something else? It just really depends.
Okay, thanks. Greg, this is one we've had questions from something you said. So this is Sensor. So thanks for watching, Sensor. With the speed delivery method, it's always a challenge to keep the existing automation suite up to date. Mm-hmm. What are the suggestions to keep it working?
Right.
Go on.
Yeah, so once I've had it where our automation tests were our living documentation, it was awesome. And, you know, if anything changed on the application, the test would need to be updated and people could read it and you could see exactly what that application done. Again, those were fine times. Those days are gone. So having good automation and keeping these up to date does face a challenge. Ideal world, yes, we'd love to have a dedicated team, but with the way the industry is and everything at the minute, I think you'd be very lucky to have a dedicated team just focused on the automation on that. Again, this community thing where the team does it, is it a bad thing if the developers get their hands dirty and update the tests if we're pushed to it? I don't think so. And also that gets rid of the siloed knowledge where only certain people in the team know about how the tests are run and the structure and everything. I would personally like to, where I'd like to get it to is where at the grooming sessions and at the sprint planning sessions, the testers have a good idea of what's coming down there and can plan this into their workload, even call it out in part of as a subtask. As you're going through, update the automation test, bring it in. It's all part of the team. We're an engineering team at the end of the day, and this benefits the whole team. It might, again, talk to your stakeholders, explain the risks of not updating these tests. You know, you're leaving holes. And talk, have that open transparency talk, bring the whole team in and get it done, basically, because the last thing you want is be left red-faced with egg on your face when your regression test has got massive holes in it, and then you're asked why these things slip through when we've seen them before. So keeping that net tight is a key thing for me.
Cheers, Greg. This is coming from Brian. I was on Brian's podcast this week, so I definitely have to put his question on here. It's an interesting one, very topical, obviously. Do you think the current spate of IT scandals is going to make stakeholders even more aware of the risks and the importance of testing? And could it potentially make those conversations easier if you highlight some of those high-profile cases? Anthony, your view on that?
Interesting technique to scaremonger, maybe just like throwing these big scary articles at them.
We don't want to be the next post office. Yeah.
I think probably the thing to highlight. I think if you do share that sort of stuff, I think it's just worth showing. I think someone shared in the team around in the US. Apparently, the QA team posted some lottery numbers incorrectly on the website for 3 days, and now they're being sued. So I think maybe focusing on like those sorts of things to say. Maybe not like, well, this is what can happen, but maybe showing that there are small inadvertent things that maybe do happen that, can cause catastrophic effects. So I think maybe don't go from the perspective of, look what could go wrong. But I think it's just more showing that there are the companies out there, potentially making mistakes and just how important testing and being more strict on quality is, because it's one of those things where probably in the case of that, lottery issue, it's probably, it's just a quick win, right? It's probably just something simple. We're just doing this quick test, probably just goes under the radar. And I think it's things like that really need to be highlighted across them. So, yeah, I mean, anything you can use to make conversations easier. But I think going back to what we were saying before around building that positive relationship, I think as long as it doesn't have any negative impact on that or trying to maybe kind of force an agenda, I think it can only help, really.
Okay. This is an interesting one. I don't know who it's from, but thank you for the question. So it says, in the discussion on speed versus quality, which of the low-risk, time-consuming tasks that the QA team can potentially overlook For example, avoid creating defects and focus on live collaboration with the dev team to report bugs, or potentially less focus on UI UX testing if the product is not new in the market. Is anyone, do we understand the question now? I think they're sort of trying to say, where could things potentially get missed? Is how I interpret that. Greg, any view there? Putting you on the spot slightly, sorry.
Yeah. So if we were looking at ways, I'm going to take the moment, focus on this UI test if the product's not new to the market. Again, you want to make sure everything's right. So break down your regression pack into small manageable chunks. If it's in a certain area, you can just break this down, test that bit quite easily, and then run your wider one to make sure. So if you're constantly delivering fast and in small chunks, of course, that lowers the risk of doing it, and testing time should be quicker because you're working in an agile way. So testing is not done last thing, and working more collaboratively with the development teams comes as a side product of that. And by doing so, by testing earlier in the life cycle, bugs get caught earlier, defects get caught earlier, and can get fixed quicker. So speed of delivery and working collaboratively go hand in hand, really, for me, because that's the way you do find these things quicker. And you can avoid creating live defects or finding them earlier in that life cycle, where it's much more costly to drag the development team back. Hey, you need to fix this before it goes back. It then needs to go back to testing. So getting them working together earlier, clear definitions, clear and non-functional requirements, then baselines and everything, all good. And the testing team and development team should have an equal understanding of what's being delivered.
Okay. Thank you. Someone here said, so this is John said, I think we've covered this point. Team ownership and responsibility with a strong leader is critical to delivering customer value at pace with embedded quality. So we spoke a lot about sort of collaboration and collective responsibility as the sort of method to succeed. We've got a couple of minutes left. We've gone through some really good questions there and covered loads of great points. And at the end of the session, we're going to write all those up and send them out to everyone who's watched. And the video will also be available on YouTube for people to watch afterwards. I'm going to put you on the spot slightly here. Apologies, but if we just got to sort of summarize what we've spoken about, can you give us like your sort of top tip for making these two things marry together effectively, speed and quality? Anthony?
I thought I was going to get away with it and Greg was going to go first. So I think, not to keep it too long, but I think the key thing I think that we picked up was like taking people on the journey, like whether it's a stakeholder, whether it's developers, whether it's the product people. I think just working out as a team and keeping everything kind of visible and understood from like a risk perspective, from a development perspective, from a QA perspective, show how we can add value, and just make sure that everyone is agreed on the plan and on board. Because if there's one person kind of pulling in the other direction, it's not going to work, and speed and quality is probably compromised if one person's not on board with that journey and process.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks a lot. Greg?
It's that two-way communication, transparency, everyone being able to see the same information at the same time. Miscommunication and people not knowing where to find things just slow things down. So setting that up right from the beginning is key for me.
Okay, thank you. Melissa, finally to you.
Mine would be quality as a culture and communication and collaboration as a fundamental, as that's just going to help with both the speed and quality narrative.
Okay, brilliant. Right, that brings us to the end of today's session. We've neatly packed it in within 59 minutes, so we've done well. We've covered loads of points. So thank you all for watching along, and obviously thanks so much to Greg, Anthony, and Melissa for sharing their time, including time to prepare for today's session. I'm sure everyone really appreciates it, as do I. The session's going to be available on YouTube within the next sort of 24 hours, and we've got another session next month. So keep a lookout for updates on that. So thanks again for everyone for joining, and hopefully see you all soon.